Welcome to another episode of Collective Conversations. I'm your host, Mike Brewer, and today I'm excited to catch up with Brock MacLean. Brock is the EVP and CRO of LeaseHawk, and Brock and I have known each other for a long time, except that I think we've only met one time in person. Brock, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mike, thanks so much. And yeah, it's funny. I feel like I've known you for forever, and I hadn't actually thought about how many times in person, but that's probably true. But I've been certainly connected and followed along with your career over the years, and appreciate the opportunity to join you today.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for investing a bit of your time with us. Yeah, I think the one and only time I ever met you in person was you were with Terry
Yeah,
Slattery.
battery,
Is that
yeah,
what it was? And
yep.
it was here in Atlanta, and there was it was one of Steve Lefkowitz's. I can't remember what he named it, but it was a
Oh yeah, the
technology.
Ambient Tech, or yeah, one of the innovation tech conferences. Yep.
That was it. That was
Yeah.
it. So yeah, I'm finally. I'm excited to catch up in person. Listen, you've had a decorated career at a number of different, in my head, prestigious multifamily firms on the business partner side. Um, Unpack your career a little bit for us and tell us what brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, it's funny. When I think of it and I start adding up the years, Mike, it just reminds me that I'm probably older than I'd like to be. Is kind of what what happens when I think about it. But I've had such amazing fortune. You're right, to be part of some really awesome brands in the space, and also been part of some really interesting kind of shifts that have been driven often by tech, and be able to kind of see those through. I got in the industry uh, you know, oh boy, gosh, nearly 27, 8 years ago with literally For Rent magazine. I mean, I'm talking about the publication itself, and when you drove around with a Thomas guide and dimes in your glove box in case you needed to use a payphone. I know I'm definitely dating myself here, but was able to kind of see the shift from that through to what we now know as the ILS space, and on into mobile, and some of the advancements that are there, and incredible advancements that have happened in that category over the years. And later in my career, I was part of the For Rent leadership team with Terry and a bunch of wonderful folks there. So I saw a lot of great things there. And then in the mean and in between times, I also did 3 tours with RealPage. And the first time there was probably only maybe 300 people in the whole company, if you can imagine, and was with them. And actually, one of the other interesting sort of changes that tech drove was the transition from core software, floppy drive software, and often DOS-based programs to what we now know as the cloud. Although, of course, we didn't know it was named the cloud in those days. And I was part of the roadshow that went around to owners and managers in the country, and discussed how we were no longer going to have hard drives under desks or floppy drives to update software. We were going to update it via the internet, and we were going to store your data, and it was going to be secure. And I remember a lot of people looking at me like, "You're crazy that we would ever do that." And even internally, I was like, "Yeah, I know it sounds a little bit out there, but clearly that I think fueled an incredible amount of advancements." And up until including, I was with RealPage through the acquisition by Thoma Bravo at the, I guess, sort of just early in 2021. At that point, RealPage is, we all know, is a significantly large international company. And it was during that time where I thought, what would I want to do next? And we were spending a lot of time talking about, because we were sort of immersed in the COVID period. So naturally, things like virtual experiences and how prospects were going to engage in our new normal was often a topic. And at LeaseHawk, Mike Mueller, who's the founder there, who I've known for years and years in the industry, who's been the founder of a couple other innovative companies over time, had been making large advancements in AI and prospect engagement, and that tech was kind of building from a quality standpoint. And I think the timing was perfect to bring it to market at a time when the market needed it, in a time when it would resonate with owners and managers, and something that was very akin to my experience, which was around prospect engagement, how people search, what's the self-discovery process look like, and how could we add efficiency in the leasing process. So I joined the LeaseHawk team just in May of 2021, And that's been a blistering fast year, and great to get back out and see everybody. And and I'm excited again to kind of be part of what I think is a sort of an expanded direction that's driven by tech, that's having an impact on the way we do business.
You know, I couldn't help but recall the Colorado backup tape that we would package this little thing, look like I guess a small version of a VHS tape. You'd back that up and you'd send it off to wherever your corporate office was in America, right? And they would do your books, and then like a month later, when it didn't matter anymore, they would send you the reports.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Just
really
crazy.
fascinating to think. And what's more fascinating is it's not that much time. The advancements that we've seen are dramatic in a fairly small window of time. And I think that's been driven by tech, of course. As you well know, our industry was probably a pretty well kept secret into the early 2000s. Pre companies going public, pre venture capitalist firm funding. All these really amazing tech advancements. The barrier to entry is being reduced by things like the cloud and reach of technology. So it's been really a fascinating period over the last 10 or 15 years, I would say.
Yeah, I think I picked up on the word blistering, and I know as it relates to LeaseHawk, but my imagination tells me that your career watching, you know, paper give way to digital in the advertising
Yeah,
space, and certainly all the advancements at RealPage, and then yeah, how I guess in my head computers interacting with people
yeah,
as opposed to people interacting with people. Not that people are going away.
right. Oh, of
Hope
course.
not, but
Yeah, no,
but
no.
you see it a lot.
Yeah, yeah. It's of course, when you're living it, right? It's sometimes you don't sort of notice, but it's conversations like this that give pause for reflection, and you realize not only has a lot happened, but I'm really thankful to have been part of it all. And even at that, I always encourage some of the people who are newer in their careers of multifamily that I feel like we're still just at the beginning, right? I feel like there's so much opportunity, and what an exciting time if you're just new to multifamily. I think it's really at a new phase of explosive growth, and the opportunities are incredible.
Yeah, and I think to speak to that point, I can't remember where I read this, and I won't be able to quote it exactly, but I was read something along the lines of, hey, in the last let's say in the last 30 years, there's been this unpacking of advancement in all industries, right? But certainly in the multifamily space. But leading along with that, or running concurrent with that, were this technology backbone that was being built, that the next 10 to 15 years in our business are going to accelerate at a pace that is just going to be right.
Yeah,
The impact of the industry is going to be 100x where it was like 10x in the past,
yeah.
and
I,
so
I completely agree.
it's going to be crazy. But
Yeah. It's both incredibly exciting and incredibly overwhelming at the same time.
I can relate to that. In the past, I don't know if this resonates with you, but I remember you could stay up with the industry movement by way of Units Magazine or the JPM, or there are a couple of other industry mags or rags, whatever you call them, where you could kind of keep a pace with what was happening in the industry. Anymore, it's like a fire hose. I
Yeah.
can't keep up. Every day I wake up and there's something new happening in the space. It's like,
Well,
oh
and,
wow.
and I was thinking, Mike, it'd be interesting for your perspective, as we come off of NAA, and really kind of standing around and looking at the breadth of incredible companies doing very innovative things in categories that really didn't have innovation for long periods of time, and seeing that, and then thinking, boy, if you're an owner and an operator, how do you begin to assimilate the nuances or the things that are going to be the most impactful, or where do you focus? Or I mean, it has to be very challenging to sift through the incredible amount of options that exist today.
Yeah, it definitely is. I actually believe in my heart of hearts that there has to be, or there will be, some sort of consultant agency out there that'll get this down. But I will tell you, just thumbnail sketch, what the way we look at it is, we have a team member sort of journey mapped out. We have a customer journey mapped out. We have a business partner journey mapped out. We also have an investor journey mapped out. And we literally try to sort of catalog all the touch points along the way, or at least as we understand them today. And then we break technology against those touch points where we think there is an opportunity to capture efficiencies or capture a cost reduction, or if it does cost a little more, is the resident going to love it so much so that they pay up for it? But it's hard. To your point, it's very hard because there are only so many hours in a day, and there are only so many people in the organization that have the bandwidth to actually look at all that stuff.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, and there's so many really cool ideas and things to dig in a little deeper on.
Unbelievable ideas. It's like technology created for problems that we didn't even know we had. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you hope it's going to create efficiency and not necessarily more overhang, I'm sure.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, I if we can, I want to dive into LeaseHawk a little bit, maybe lift up the hood a little bit.
Yeah.
I am deeply, deeply fascinated. I won't name the company or the person that first turned me on to AI as it relates to leasing, but we were very early adopters. Let's say this was like 3.5, almost 4 years ago, plus or minus. I'm probably off a little bit, but we deployed a technology across our entire portfolio. It was very early innings, so there were lots of bugs, there were lots of integration issues, and so on and so forth. But since that moment, and we ended up moving away from that, but that was partly because we were selling off a lot of our assets to capitalize on the market. But I got deeply, deeply interested in it, and maybe we can kick off by just describe a little bit about what LeaseHawk actually does out in the marketplace for operators.
Yeah. On the AI side, the brand is ACE, which is LeaseHawk's brand, but it's fully customizable name, look, feel, all those things. So while that's our brand, it's very much a fully integrated piece of a digital marketing strategy for a company. And the idea was to capture prospects at point of engagement. I know for me, I often thought as I got older, my sort of patience and my expectation of immediacy would somehow begin to mellow, but in fact, I think it's gone the other direction. And I'm more than convinced that today's prospect is very much the same. And so, we've got an industry where occupancy rates are high, lead volume is enormous still. You've got challenges with staffing often at the community level, lots of hats being worn by leasing staff. And so how do we create through tech, the ability to enhance the prospect experience, improve the immediacy of communication, take that lead volume and convert more into guest cards, appointments, and ultimately leases, add accretive bandwidth to your overall leasing model, and even flexibility in the way you deploy it. So those were at the core of the things that we were trying to get to. Upon analysis, we realized that there's still a lot of principles in our space that are consistent over the last 20 years. 50% of leads originate on the phone still, which might seem surprising, but is really the case. Increasingly, we've got a population that wants to text, and a person going through a text conversation, their intent to rent is probably pretty high because they're engaged in that process. And of course, chat being probably the oldest of the AI functions that's around and a key component of digital marketing strategy. So the idea was to capture prospects when, where, and how they want to communicate. And so I think having we call it an omni-channel approach, which is voice, text, and chat, was a way to do that and was able to meet that prospect when they're ready to communicate. If by chance there wasn't someone available at the site, or if it was after hours, or if it was the middle of the night, the leasing office would be able to extend the reach of that communication in a very conversational way, customized for that site, including pricing and availability, book appointments across all the tour types and so on. And so we became very much an extension of the leasing office was the idea. And that is at the core of what we do and where we're finding a lot of success for our clients. What is interesting is, in addition to that, there have been some opportunities spring from AI that weren't maybe initially contemplated. I mean, if the initial thought was prospect engagement, what's also happened is we're able to handle a few things like some of those staffing challenges, like provide options around call centers. Could be a hybrid model where you've got some communication handled by AI, some making its way to a person-enabled call center. The other interesting thing has been along with those staffing things, the desire to create some culture change, some work-life balance, some advantages in recruiting. And so we've got some clients who are considering things like not staffing a leasing office on a Sunday and letting AI handle all that. It promotes good culture for your staff or recruiting, because maybe somebody doesn't want to work on weekends or something like that. So runway for your leasing staff, flexibility in your leasing model, efficiency in leasing, and then efficiency in what are the leads most likely to transact, the ones that get integrated into your CRM that have been through AI. A couple interesting data points. The approval rate for those applicants is generally higher when they interact with AI than not. You might ask, well, why is that? And that's because they've done a lot of pre-qualifying. They know the rental requirements. They know if their dog's going to be accepted or if they've got a gym or whatever those things are important. They've already kind of narrowed that down. So by the time they get there, they feel pretty confident that they fit. So approval rates are higher. Again, efficiency at the leasing staff. The other thing that's interesting is the time to move in from application to move in is reduced. And once again, it's because they're pre-qualified. They already know they want to move. They're not going through the process. So the time from application to lease and move in is often shorter than what we would know as a more traditional process. So I give you all that detail because in addition to the core capture more prospects when, where, and how they want to communicate, incremental yield through approval rates, time to move in, staffing efficiency, those are all areas of lift that owners and managers are realizing via AI, in addition to the core principles of prospect engagement.
Wow, there is a ton. I had like 57 questions that came into my mind as you were speaking through all of that. I'm going to be all over the board here.
Yeah, of course.
I'm interested. Let's key off of omni-channel. Certainly, there are additional channels that are being introduced into the ecosystem today. Let's call it TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, etc.
Yeah.
And is it fair to assume that at some point that same sort of interaction or engagement or trigger point can be, I guess, you can get into one of those platforms and actually start to engage with AI through Snapchat, through Instagram, etc.?
Yeah, you could extend the same links that would exist on a website. Could be a chat experience, could be a phone number that's voice or text enabled, can be integrated now across your digital marketing strategy. So not just your website, but your ILS partners, your social media profiles, your points of engagement like a Snapchat or a TikTok. The idea, or even the other big one, Mike, is the amount of traffic coming from Google business profiles now, becoming a core area, right? You can extend the reach of chat, appointment setting, call, text, all those things to there. So you're meeting that prospect who may or may not ever make it to your website, but you're meeting them where they're most comfortable engaging.
And to key off that point for a second, may not ever make it to your website. Do you think that let's call it e-commerce, that actual transaction can happen no matter where the origination of the lead is, all through AI, from sort of the beginning all the way to the end of a lease signing? That can all happen with AI and no.
Absolutely, yeah. Because within the ACE platform, I mean, in addition to all the the questions that you can either click bubbles or actually type in, and being able to type in natural language is kind of intriguing because we can also provide insights to our clients about what are people really asking about, what do they want to know about, and you can begin to define your SEO strategy or things like that because you're now getting insights into what they're looking for. So all those things are possible, but when you think about it, in addition to the traditional Q&A, we also can serve up videos, photos, floor plans, links to applications, all those things that can exist without the formality, if you will, of what we know to be a more traditional process. I think we're early innings in that, that end-to-end experience, but it's more than possible today.
And do you think so? I at least my loose understanding, uneducated understanding, the difference between natural language processing or the NLP or what you just described there is this sort of natural conversation. There's a difference between that and sort of this what I guess is described as an understanding versus, like, you have that kind of conversation, but then the AI is actually intelligent enough to understand sort of an intention that particular prospect or resident, whatever, wants to happen, right? There's a difference between those two things.
Yeah. So you've got, I mean, I guess the term often used is there's guided conversation, which would be a traditional, like, click a button, like rental requirements, click and you get that. Or, click schedule a tour, something like that. Um, NLP does a couple things. One, in a chat experience, it allows you to type in questions and think about, like, the 25 ways you could ask about a gym, fitness center, gym, where do I work out? All those sort of intents, right? That the platform can read and respond with details about the fitness facility in a community, as an example. NLP also allows for voice and text, which is a really huge way that leads are being generated today. So truly conversational. Ask a question. Is there a dog park? And get the detail back. So I think it's about 150, 160 leasing questions customized by site that can be completely integrated into the platform. So the intents are read, and that's what drives the responses.
And so in my head, I have to unwind this in my head every time I have this conversation. So there is a certain amount of information that is baked in. In other words, you have to put all the detail for your community into the system. You have to help it learn. But over time, that database, not only germane to your property, but germane to all properties in the LeaseHawk system, are coming together to produce what would be more contextual type answers, or actually learned answers, as opposed to those fed to answers, if that makes sense.
That's exactly right. Every 2 weeks, we are kind of providing updates, and we're building that learned experience, not just on the individual property, but that experience across all. Much the way I think the Tesla revolution was born, right? The experience of how people drive those cars is not a one-off scenario. It's across all the connected vehicles, and they enhance that driving experience accordingly. So it keeps getting better all the time. More conversational, more intense, more natural, if you will. So that from a consumer experience, even if we recognize that we are talking to artificial intelligence, we become more comfortable with it because we're able to speak the way we would communicate with another person and be able to have that interaction in a way that makes sense.
That makes. Do you think it's too far-fetched to think that I've heard the term ambient context, right? And so what is around you influences the way you might behave in that particular circumstance. So is too far-fetched to think that an AI leasing sort of platform could take into consideration where a person is standing at a moment in time and what the AI knows to be around that person at that moment in time, as a way of, dare I say, influencing their decision to move forward in a conversation with your community?
There is no doubt. We were talking earlier about how, despite the incredible evolution of tech, how we're still probably standing on the precipice of, like, that much more. And I think we're in the same category here, where the AI that exists today is incredibly efficient, incredibly effective at converting prospects to leads and ultimately appointments. And we're seeing great success with that. But I think it's just the beginning. And I think the ability to create even more effective experiences, both the ambient experience that you're talking about, or even the ability to be able to have self-guided tours being driven by an AI leasing agent, right? So that kind of, like, QA that might happen or traditionally happen with a leasing agent kind of be able to be managed that way. I think we're definitely on the precipice of those things coming together. And if you think about the efficiency that will create in the overall leasing model, where you can take your leasing staff and, today they're wearing 20 hats. Boy, if you could reduce it to the 5 critical ones, right, that require that human engagement, and have AI be able to handle the repetitious, more sort of block and tackling, I think the yield being generated on a property or a portfolio could be significant.
I couldn't agree with you more. We one of the one of our driving principles here at Radco is this thing that we labeled ACEO: automate, centralize, eliminate, or outsource, right? And so I often think about AI as it relates to any one of those four words, and how do you use AI to sort of automate, right, or the other things. I'm interested. In my imagination, I can see a day when prospects, let's say people are cataloged in your platform. You know a lot about them. You also likely know when they're keying up to move again. So you've brought them to my place, you've put them in there, but now you have the ability to sort of see when they're going to make their next move. And in my head, you can insert yourself early on in that conversation. Either it's sort of, there's some weirdness there, right? But keeping them in my portfolio, so to speak, and or doing what is in the best interest of that particular person and farming them out to other apartment property management companies across the country. Is that reasonable to think that's a possibility?
In theory, right, the data is there, and of course, in my time at RealPage, you have a really good indication of what people's timelines are for things that they might consider. And we're an agnostic partner, and we've got, I think, 45 plus integrations in the country. So in theory, yes, I mean, there's the what's possible, and then there's what I think would be I think that the right thing to do, and what I
Yeah.
wouldn't advocate for is getting in front of a prospect who's 11 months into their lease and saying, "Hey, are you looking for a new place?" And Mike looking at me going, "Wait, why are you getting my residents to pick another place?" So the same reason back 25 years ago, Mike, we didn't deliver format magazines to the apartment doors, right, at the
Right.
communities, right? Because that typically probably wouldn't go over well with our customers. But you're right in the sense that how data will be able to create efficiency for, and if you're the prospect, or you're the in this case a resident, being able to be served up, or even be relatable, that they know who I am, they know what my interests are, they know what things motivate me, and to be able to have a more customized approach, I think is very viable. And I think it could be viable, especially if a proactive management company did that within their portfolio, kind of thing. Oh, we'd love for you to renew, but if not, we've got this wonderful community, just down the road here, or something like that. That might feel very personal and interactive.
I agree with you 100% on all those points. And I think that if you're preemptive in that, if you can keep that in that conversation isolated to your portfolio, and the AI is working behind the scenes, and it's preemptive in nature, in that it's paying attention to all these signals through these conversations, these little touch points that you've pre-programmed or choreographed into the system. It could, at least in my head, it could sort of handle a lot of potential concerns and issues without you ever having, it's, hey, so and so is behaving in such a way that you might want to touch base with them person to person, because we sense these, they're going to make a decision that is adverse to your community. They're going to move out, or they're going to complain, or they're going to whatever. You could use the system. The system can be smart enough to do that stuff.
The early days of that are happening right now. We've spent some time talking about prospects, but on the resident front, right, which the industry's been blessed with very high occupancy rates for a number of years, and residents are at the core, incredibly important, and it's much more economical probably to keep one than to find another. And so we are developing now a very expansive resident workflow as well, to do the early stages of what you're talking about. So from a resident experience standpoint, make it easy for things like, for non-emergencies, of course, but things like process a work order, right? Or reserve an amenity, or things like that could all be handled via AI engagement, without having to either make sure you're in office hours so you get a leasing agent to help you, or being, at 8 o'clock at night and not being able to get anyone to answer the phone because you've got a leaky faucet, things like that. Prioritizes those requirements for your maintenance staff. So the early stages of being sure that you're touching the residents on a regular basis, or making their experience that much better, is where we are today. And then I think, of course, the sentiments that could be derived from those points of engagement will build on what you're talking about, which would be further intense or red flags potentially of where you have some risk. And I think as we move along, that's an area of opportunity, I think, as well for AI, definitely.
That brings to mind that the playing off that or keying off that, there's sort of a labor distribution component as well, in that centralization is a big
Mm-hmm.
buzzword right now in the industry. And I think many years ago, it was centralizing sort of AM responsibilities or assistant manager responsibilities. Now it's leasing, right? Centralizing a lot of that. My imagination tells me the next thing is potentially centralizing service side, or what is called maintenance in our industry. But labor distribution is such that you have a hub, and the AI kind of is the backbone, the communication backbone, and it's smart enough to know, hey, Atlanta traffic's really bad right now, so you might want to leave at
Mm-hmm.
6:45 instead of 7:45, and so it can bake all this in and
Mm-hmm.
actually make your labor more efficient.
Yeah,
I,
I think you're right. I mean, and now as more and more open access to key forms of data, and especially in a real time basis, are available, and the exchange of that data in real time make the expansiveness of the engagement for prospects, residents, or for teams at the site, or even in a centralized experience, to be that much more elevated. And those, you're right. I think those are the things, as we look out over the next year, two, three, those are the areas I think of efficiency. Because in the end, as values continue to go up, as we continue to see rents on the increase, you can only sort of move that needle so much so fast. So where else do you create some efficiency, right? It's going to be in people costs, in efficiency, and flexibility, and office hours, all those things. If they can be handled by tech very economically, that incremental yield is going to make a difference in the overall success of the portfolio.
yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's like the use cases are endless, and the second you unpack one, you're thinking about the next one.
Yeah, you could whip yourself up for sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
no
that
doubt.
is so true.
Yeah.
Um, I so I'm interested if you were. Um, I want to say this diplomatically, because I'm certainly respectful of all the giant property management systems out there. I'll leave the names unsaid, but
Sure.
I think there's been this sense, or maybe reality over the years, that it becomes hard to play with these property management systems for the right reasons. Like you want to be a walled garden because you want to protect your interests and things of that nature. But it's also frustrating on the side of an operator, because you want to employ some of these technologies. And going back to the AI that we had, we finally gave up because the property management system that we use wouldn't play nice with the the AI, right, or the
Yeah.
leasing agent. And so,
Yeah.
have you seen some thawing of the ice, if you will, in that area of the business that uh, will make
Um,
in the future?
yeah. I mean, I think messaging wise, broadly in the industry, is this we're open, for business kind of messaging, and I think intent wise, that's probably the case. Um, but I would say beyond that, then some are more challenging than others for a variety of reasons, and some of it could be focused intentional, others could be just a matter of resource and commitment. I also think you've got varying degrees of flexibility in the platforms with which things are built, and the ease of sort of integrating in and out into those would probably vary in some cases. As I say, I think the intent is there, and in the end, customers are the ones that are the biggest influencers. And I think if a customer wants it, it tends to happen, right? More so than if it's somebody like a company like LeaseHawk going to one of the large tech stacks and saying, "Oh, we'd like to do this together," and they say, "Well, awesome. Who's going to use it?" Right? And so that's typically the response. But if you're coming with an application that makes sense and is going to improve the experience for a mutual customer, then I would say the general disposition is very positive in that way. And some are just easier to work with than others, more just given style and infrastructure than desire, I would say.
That makes sense. What I hear you saying with the style and infrastructure is, hey, if our property management system is built on ancient architecture, it's a little harder to get that integration happening as opposed to somebody that's built on a modern day architecture.
Can be, yeah, can be, right? I mean, um, but I do think that we've gotten better in that way. But by the same token, I think there's also some interesting tech stacks that have done a great job of building. While it is a bit of a walled garden, there's some efficiency in the platforms that are in place that add value for clients that are there. And so, what is interesting in our space, I think it's hard to be great at everything. You can be good enough at everything, and sometimes that's good enough, but it's hard to be great at everything. And I think there's so many wonderful point solution tech companies doing some incredibly innovative things in categories and drive, whether it's a better experience for a prospect or a resident or for yield for owners and managers. I mean, I think there's things out there, and I think, as you say, and I know you've always been a guy who's always wanted to look for what are the things that can make the biggest difference for your business, and you'd rather have those than have good enough across a suite that's this long, right?
Yeah, and you're right in that statement, and I think in my heart of hearts, it's like the David and Goliath thing, right? And I'm always for David, and it's because I do think I met Mike Mueller a long time ago. I met other interesting people in the space, and when I talk to him, I just get thrilled, right? I get excited about what they're working on, and I just want to run with it and make application of it and endorse it and blow the doors off or help blow the doors off for them. But then, it's that next conversation with the other player that has to be in the room, and it's like,
yeah.
So bummed. It's such a bummer.
You're right, and I would say, one of the things that we have done that's been really helpful is we made the investment in time and energy to get the integrations already in place. So now when we speak with a prospective client, we're pretty confident that what was once potentially a kind of an objection, we've already solved for. And so, as you're looking, you always have that apprehension of like, oh yeah, but how am I going to plug it into this ecosystem that I have? And we've kind of made the effort to be sure those things are already in place to kind of minimize that, because it can be daunting or even frustrating to get there. So I eliminating that has been a critical component for us.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, and I certainly want to express that I'm not discounting to the property management systems that are out there in the world. They're fantastic in so many ways. It's just that one way that I sometimes get frustrated by. But
I understand.
To pivot drastically, there's a lot of talk about the metaverse, and I'm interested. I have to believe in my heart of hearts that Mike Mueller, yourself, people are talking about this, and because Mike's always like 37 years ahead of everyone else.
Yeah.
Is that a conversation that's happening internally, if you're allowed to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is, and of course, I'll throw out that cliche, it's on the roadmap kind of thing. I think the there is in the shorter run, right? There's amazing advancements to be made for I mentioned residents, and then even kind of further bifurcating the industry itself, right, around things like student, right, because there's some uniqueness there to that, and so we see this sort of prospect resident experience still has some room for advancement, and then I think from there, of course, kind of a little farther out, but how do we take the experiences that exist today, take them to another level to where somebody literally from their couch, because none of us seem to leave our couches these days, can sort of find yourself literally in the unit with your VR glasses on or something like that, and sit on the couch and kind of turn on the TV and look out the window and see your view, and I mean, there was a time, Mike, where things that seemed a bit out there, I'd have said, yeah, we'll never get there. I've come to the conclusion now that everything is possible. Like I don't rule anything out anymore because I've seen transitions of things that I would have not thought possible. So I think they are entirely possible. They'll be driven, of course, I think, by not only brands like LeaseHawk, but also what's the consumer experience, and not just the multifamily prospect, but what are our expectations, right? When we engage with any brand, we're looking for I don't know, a new car or a new couch, or will we all get to the point where the tech is in our homes that allow us for that immersive, experience in the metaverse? And we're probably not there yet, but I mean, is it plausible? As we've seen the cost of tech and the robustness of it change our lives in so many ways. Is it reasonable to think it's going to be in our space? And I think absolutely. Yeah, I think we'll get there down the line.
Yeah, I agree. It brought to mind. We were sitting in a strategic meeting. I think it was a Monday, not this past Monday, but the Monday prior to that, and I talked about the metaverse and sort of some potential applications of it. And somebody on my team said it's a video game, and I'm like, yeah, I do get that. In the
Yeah,
same respect, I think this is like, it will evolve into something that feels not so much like a video game, but more like real life, but
yeah,
in a digital space. And
I
just
think
like
so.
you rail against Facebook or Twitter, who's going to do that? And look at those platforms today.
Yeah, no, I think so too. I mean, and of course it's driven as well, just generationally, right? Because the group coming along, like you and I remember a day where like we were we had rulers and pencils and abacus and I didn't even have a computer on my desk. I mean, we're definitely dating ourselves here, but I remember those days, right? But there's a generation coming along who doesn't know a day without Wi-Fi and virtual experiences, and so the expectation for them is this is just the beginning. Where do we go? So yeah, I don't doubt for a second. Back to your comment about the amount of evolution of tech will dwarf what happened over the last 15 or 20 years, and I think this is going to be a component of that for sure.
I can't leave this unsaid. To your point about this new generation, it would I'd be super interested to know how many of the viewers that are watching this when it does or publish the thing that's behind you in that picture. I know what that is, but I'd
Yes,
be interested. We should give something away. The
we
first
should.
person that is like, what, I don't know, 25 years or younger, without
Yeah,
going to Google, that identifies what that thing is,
yeah.
gets a prize.
It's funny. It's a piece, and yeah, we won't talk about what it is, but the quick story is literally this is a piece as you see it that my wife and I found at a small little 6 unit community getting rehab down at the beach, and it was sitting out front, and it just said free, and I look, I go, oh, I gotta have that, right? And so I brought it home and I put it on the wall, and of course in this age of video communication that we've had over the past 2 years, it has been actually a wonderful communication piece because invariably, right, it's either like, oh my god, I know exactly, or somebody looking at me going, man, that art deco piece is awesome that you have. It's one of the two, generally speaking. So yeah, it's been a great addition to my office for sure.
I had a total blast for the past of thinking about Foreigner and Jukebox Hero, and I'll
Yeah,
just leave it at
yeah,
that. It's like,
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
and always losing that thing.
Yes, yeah, or breaking it, right? Yeah,
Yeah, or breaking it. Yeah,
yeah,
that's the other thing.
missing a prong. Yeah, for sure.
Well,
Yeah.
I listen. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. And is there anything that you'd like to sort of end cap with as it relates? We have viewers, we have listeners.
Yeah.
It's across the country. We're into Canada now, so you got a pretty broad audience of people that are watching or listening.
Hey, I'd love to hear you in Canada. I'm a born and raised Canadian, as you know, so that's great to hear. I mean, it's actually great to see a lot of the Canadian companies making their way to NAA this year, which was fun. No, Mike. Firstly, thank you so much. I mean, as I say, I've been a fan for a long time, and appreciate the opportunity to join the show today. I would say the only thing I would leave is, as you're listening to our conversation and even looking at some of the history we've shared over multifamily, now is the time to embrace tech and where we're going. And when you think about tech, I often look at some of the things, even some of the things I'm doing that maybe for myself may not resonate with the way I would want to communicate. But there is a huge constituent of people who are very comfortable and want the flexibility to communicate when, where, and how makes sense for them. And as a digital marketer in our space, being sure you cast the net and have those opportunities available to meet each and every prospect in the way that makes sense for them, I think can only lead to greater success, efficiency, more leads that convert to appointments, a better resident experience. All of those things will really resonate with that person, and I think only elevate the brand that you represent.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and very well said. I think that's a beautiful end cap to this conversation. I appreciate it, Brock. I know it's an investment of time to come on and do something like this. My hope in my heart of hearts is that it gets out to the world and your phone rings, or there's a chatbot conversation. So I appreciate the time again. And for everyone else, we will see you next time on Collective Conversations.